Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of Novel Therapy.
Wow.
I'm Kate Fennessy, aspiring author and social media marketer.
And I'm Helen Brown, New York Times bestselling author, and we've got a very special guest today.
We do. This is our third guest, is it? Our third guest?
Maybe, yeah, or
Who
who knows?
It doesn't matter, but it's a very exciting guest.
This is a guest we've wanted right from the beginning.
That is true.
This is Phoebe Morris, a very, very talented, what do you call yourself? Illustrator.
Yeah, mostly Illustrator now.
From Wellington, New Zealand, who has done the most magnificent job illustrating Cleo and Rob, and I'm really looking forward to talking with you some more about how you went about doing that. I think process is a word I don't really like process. It's quite close to journey as a word. We'll see how we go.
Exactly. And we've just come back this morning from Jeffrey's bookstore in Malvern. Is that the suburb? Malvern?
Yeah.
Yes. In High Street, Malvern. No, not High Street. In Glenferrie Road, Malvern. Where Phoebe has done a gorgeous illustration for their shop window for Cleo and Rob. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you did this morning, just so for people who won't get a chance to see it?
Yeah, so it's done with chalk pen. They're called chalk pens. There's not that much chalky about them, and it's just freehand straight onto the window. And you have to kind of be conscious that it's going to be seen from the other side, so you're kind of drawing backwards a little bit. And for that one, I just did a bunch of cats, different cats stacked together, keep it on the cat theme for the book. That was,
And they were wonderful. They had all
Much it.
very different personalities,
Yes.
and one of them was very lion-like, but
yes, there was a
Kate
lion.
was very drawn to.
It was.
I was trying to steer me away from the lions. Back
More
towards the
sensible
pussycats.
cats, yes.
The lion stood out though, but it's a very joyful, gorgeous thing, and we saw it from across the street. It looks fantastic.
It's also whimsical.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful.
Yeah, so we'll pop a photo up because we have a Facebook group that some of our listeners are in. So we'll pop a photo up in the Facebook group of the window.
And you were saying you do quite a lot of public art.
Yeah, so I've done other displays in bookshops. I've done maybe one or two other drawings onto the window like that, but mostly murals, so painted murals. And I've done that with other people from our studio, and we actually called ourselves Brush Brigade for a little bit because we don't use spray cans, we use brushes, and that's slightly not unusual, but less common in street art. Yeah, just in terms of a process, it is probably more practical or faster to use spray cans, but you get a different effect to the painting. So usually I'm using a brush.
So if anyone goes to Wellington in New Zealand, where would they see an example of your street art?
Where are they? There's some in Newtown kind of area. I've got one up at Pole Hill, which we just talked about.
Maybe you could
park.
send us a photo and we could pop it in the group.
Yeah. There's one in a bookshop there as well. But they're sort of funny things because sometimes they'll move or they'll get painted over because some of them were in shipping containers. So the shipping containers, I don't know where they've gone now. But,
Argentina.
could be, yeah.
I might just get you to wriggle up a bit closer to the mic, Phoebe, if that's all right, just in case. So what we do when we start our episode is we do a checkup because this is a clinic.
Oh
This is
yeah, I
Novel
forgot.
Therapy.
It's a clinic.
It is a clinic, so basically we like to do a check-in. Usually we record on a Wednesday, and today's Friday. Oh look, we've got a visitor to our clinic. This is who actually likes to check us in. Don't you, Jane? So do you want to start, Helen? How has your week been? I know there's been a lot going on with the launch of Cleo and Rob, but what have you been up to in the last week and a bit?
Well, I keep trying to remember. I've been doing quite a lot of radio interviews, ABC radio interviews, and that's been interesting to see how people might be going to respond to Cleo and Rob. It's always felt like a bit of an edgy project, writing a children's book that's about loss and grief, and I've felt that kind of from some of the interviewers, that they've found it a little bit challenging, but I don't think children will. I think children are very pragmatic. So I'm waiting for my first child reviewer. And that's Jonah's bottom.
You're getting a nice clear shot. He's really sticking it out there for everyone on YouTube. Jonah is currently just kind of on the table getting a bit of a pat from Helen.
Yeah, so that's me. And I've had lunch with a few friends, which I haven't done for ages, so that's been nice too.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. And what about you, Phoebe? What have you been up to in the last week or so? Anything interesting or?
Also a bit of a blur. I think trying to wrap up work before coming over here. I did a bookshop window display again for Cleo and Rob, which is at Unity Books in Wellington.
And that looks stunning.
Did you see
I
that?
saw that on social media.
Yeah, so that was fun. And it was really rainy crap weather, so just like a lot of like shaking my fist at the weather. And then I've been
effective.
No, I've been working on a book cover design as well, and I was actually trying to finish that on the plane over on my iPad.
And what's that book?
I can't talk about it yet.
Oh, okay, don't talk about it.
But
That's
it's
all
out
right.
in March with another release, so it's been a really busy year.
It's nice to be popular.
Yeah, oh, that's cool. Yeah, well, my week's been kind of average in terms of busyness. I was telling the girls before that I have started doing an e-course online about launching an e-course online. It's very meta, isn't it? So I'm doing an e-course, and I'm very excited because I see a lot of potential there in terms of my world of social media marketing and teaching others to do it. So that's been kind of exciting. I also actually taught a real life workshop about social media marketing this week in Mornington, which was great. Another lovely group of ladies, women.
Yeah, you're a very good teacher, Kate.
I enjoy it. Thank you.
You're natural.
Helen's been to one of my workshops, which was on influencer marketing, which is a specific one. This one was quite broad. It was just on getting unstressed and unfrazzled with your social media as a business. But what I loved about it is that the women there, women are always so generous and a little bit self-doubty. Like a lot of them were it took them a while to open up, and then you realise you've got this incredibly talented group of creative business women.
Why are we like that?
I'm not sure.
My friend had a good quote about it, which meant something like, I think, men are rewarded for showing potential, women are rewarded for showing results, which I think is incredibly true. So as a man, if you seem like you're gonna, that you're kind of onto it and you could do it, they're like, yeah, off you go. Whereas if you're a woman, you're like, oh, prove to me that you know what you're doing. So I think
so true.
part of it comes from that, and yeah,
Still got a long way to go, haven't we?
definitely.
Yeah, we've got to keep up the fight.
Yeah, there's a funny comedian I follow called Rosie Waterland, who's a young writer in Australia, and she says, I wish I had the confidence of a mediocre white guy.
Yeah.
Like, it's so true, isn't it? Like, anyway. But yes, and the only other thing, which is a bit of a guilty pleasure, is I've been watching The Bachelorette, and I'm really into it because.
Do you watch that, Phoebe?
I don't. I'm my sort of, what is it called? Reality TV show of choice is RuPaul's Drag Race pretty religiously, and it's actually made me understand people who are sports fans and rugby fans and why they get so involved, because my family's like that. I'm like, why do you need to see the commentary? Why do you need to see this live? Like, why do you need to see people talking about the game after the game? Like, it's ridiculous. And I'm the same.
You're at that level with
Yeah, it's like I need to watch like YouTube recaps afterwards and like see what people thought, and it's like I want the background.
Tell me
There's
about
like a spin-off thing where you can see behind the scenes, gotta watch that, and like
okay, you're invested.
I'm
So you're a
invested.
big fan. See, I'm similar because I watched The Bachelorette mainly for the purpose of listening to a really good podcast recap, which is by Rosie Waterland. The show is greatly enhanced by listening to the podcast.
Really?
Oh God, yeah.
You guys are insane.
Yeah.
Well, if to add to the general sort of ambience, I've got very hooked on something called The Detectorists, and it's a BBC program,
I like this
and
idea.
it's about these guys who are metal detectors who go around. I mean, haven't you ever seen those people and you think, God, what?
Searching on the beach
What
for coins.
losers,
Yes.
and
do
I
think
really
that.
don't want to meet you ever. But actually watching this show, you get drawn into their world and their search for hope and dreams.
That's
And
sweet.
yeah, and it's so, there's some wonderful, you'd love, Phoebe, the visuals are so beautiful of grass growing and a butterfly here, or or the rain coming up across a hill.
That sounds like a nice unexpected
And
week.
it's a really good thing to watch before you go to sleep. Because
Well, there you
start
go.
to, But I'm not about to buy one of those.
You're not going to ask Santa for Christmas? Can you imagine Helen with headphones on? Beep, beep, at Phillip Island.
Oh gosh, I'd be a really character.
I like it.
Very good
That's
character.
classic. Oh dear. Well, there you go. So that's our catch up. Our check in. And in terms of the clinic, usually we're talking about my first attempt at writing a novel. That's the sort of loose idea, but we thought we'd love to learn more about your world, Phoebe, because a lot of our listeners are interested in creativity in general, whether it's writing a novel specifically or just writing or just any creative project. We've talked about knitting and painting and anything. So we'd love to hear, like, as a well, we're all creatives. As a fellow creative, I'd love to know, like, tell us a bit about how you got to do what you're doing now. What led you to this point where you're illustrating for Helen's book? Is that a really big question?
Yeah, it's a big question. I guess I've always been really into drawing and writing, and drawing to the extent that I was doing it at lunchtime at school, you know, or I was doing it in my books and getting told off, which sounds like a cliche, but I was, you know, doing that, and it was just an impulse that I had, or like, you know, just maybe like a nervous thing. You just need to keep your hands occupied in some way, and that's kind of what I did. And I mostly drew animals for like years and years. I just drew a dog. Aww. And then kind of branched out to other animals, and I actually really hated drawing people for the longest time. I just didn't find them interesting to draw. And then kind of at college was really into painting and stuff. Actually got better marks in English than I did in my art classes, but didn't see myself having a career in that. Like I felt kind of better about doing illustration type work as a job, because I quite liked having a box to work with, like a brief, rather than like the fine art path where you're like, I'm going to express myself with, you know, this deep thing I need to express to people. I wanted an aspect of self-expression, but I wanted it to be like connected to something or grounded by something, or to have parameters to kind of play with. So it's, I guess, more of a problem-solving element to it that I enjoyed.
And did you go to fine art school after?
Yeah, so I went to, wasn't quite fine art, it was more design school actually. So it was Massey University in Wellington. The course is called Visual Communication Design, and it's 4 years. So with honours, and you could do illustration papers within that, and it was technically your minor, but I basically did all the illustration papers. I did a little bit of animation, and then I actually did quite a bit of typography and a tiny bit of graphic design and like some media stuff and like a whole mix.
Sounds wonderful.
And look,
I think, you know, sometimes I know from living in New Zealand, sometimes you can feel, oh, this is the ultimate backwater, nothing ever happens here. But in your world, you've got Peter Jackson and the Lord of the Rings legacy and all the other movies that have since been made there. It must actually be quite a stimulating environment.
Totally. And Weta's quite like hooked into that course now as well. Like they kind of see that as a place where they could get potentially new staff from. And when I started there, I was like, yeah, I want to work at Weta and be in the film industry, but it's quite a full-on grind and quite a specific kind of culture. And I just found that it didn't suit me, and that I was drawn more to the kind of narrative-based picture book type work, and also working in a range of styles rather than just sort of figurative work, or sort of an aesthetic that's typical of concept art, where it's you're kind of having to do the same style most of the time, and it's like more idea generation, or you know, everything's quite realistic looking because you're needing to design it for being sort of filmed in the real world, or you know,
well, I'm very grateful that you decided to do picture books, and I know you've already done several. And when Alan and Unwin expressed interest in doing this children's book, they showed me about the work of 5 different illustrators, and Phoebe's work just jumped out at me. You know, it was edgy, it was modern, it was fresh, and I crossed all my fingers and toes and hoped that she would take this project on. So what did you think of it when you first got it?
I was actually in New York when I was getting
in
contact
so
with her. At the time I was like, I want to just
casually in New
Skype
York.
this publisher. I was on holiday there for the very first time.
Cool.
It was so cool there. I was staying with friends, and that came in, and I was nervous at first because I already had another book lined up for kind of the window they were talking about, and I was like, oh god, can I do one back to back, because they're so full on. And then they were a bit flexible on it, so it kind of looked like it could happen. And then at first when I read the text, I was like, oh wow, just in terms of the difficulty of the subject matter, or, you know, how sort of different it was from what I was expecting or what I normally get kind of shown, you know, for text in terms of subject matter. And at first I was like, oh, maybe this is too much, like, you
I
know, to
wondered if
handle
you
this,
might- yeah.
you'd have to be able to, you know, do this, and you'd have to make sure you don't do this, and you'd have to, you know,
So
not
what-
oversimplify and all
Right.
these things like that, and you wouldn't want to do a style that makes it look too cartoony and kind of naff. And then I was like, actually, because I'm thinking about all these things, maybe I am the right person to do it. And then I really liked Helen's writing as well and thought it was just so beautifully done, and I went from being unsure to being really possessive of it, and I was like, this is my project.
Love
Now
it.
everyone else like
Everyone
go
go
away.
away.
Yeah, like I need to do this. And like I came to like the challenging aspect of it, and just felt like it could be done poorly without the right consideration. Actually, I could pull it off. So I was quite happy to do it after that.
You're, I hope you don't mind me saying, you're only 27, and yet there is such emotional depth in some of those images, particularly the one well, there are several that really touch me, but the one of the boy on the road looking out across, his brother has just been run over, and there's the bird in the box looking up, and they're both startled and lost, and in their tinges of red and exhaust fume. How did you come up with that?
The image of the pigeon came to me first. I originally pictured it without actually showing Rob in it, and to me it was kind of like the expression of the bird. Like, I guess I'm a very visual person, so it's like I'm watching a little movie in my head when I sort of am reading your writing, and for me it sort of needed to be close and needed to be sort of from Rob's, you know, eye level of view, or kind of not be, you know, distant. It needed to have that like
tight,
so almost claustrophobic kind of, you know, aspect to it, because all your focus is in that little moment, you know, all of the rest of the world is gone. And I didn't want it to be grim, obviously, but I wanted to have a little hint of that, which is why I decided on the brake light for the red, because it sort of gives it a slightly
dramatic.
like element like that. And then I knew that the exhaust would be another element that I could kind of weave in, again, like closing in that environment and making it almost slightly dreamlike or sort of isolated.
It created an atmosphere, you know.
Yeah, and then there are a few that's kind of all I pictured was that kind of view, and then it was a matter of thinking, okay, where do I put the camera, basically, you know, am I behind the pigeon looking at Rob, or in Rob's point of view? And in the end we went with him looking at the pigeon and you reading his expression, which I think was the right way to go, and for a reader you can connect with him. And then I guess when it came to executing it, just a lot of time on the face, like his face, the pigeon, like a lot of time on that spread to really nail it. It gave it a lot of attention, because it needed to be right.
I showed it to Rob, who's now 42. I think I've been saying he's 43, but he's 42. And he went through the pages, looked at it carefully and quietly, and said, "This is exactly how I remember it."
Wow.
And it made me wonder, it's so
it's
so
incredible.
accurate. Did you actually go around Wellington and look for the place where Sam was run over?
No, I didn't until more recently, actually. Like, I had a moment where I was like, where was that? And I realised I think I've been driving through it a few times.
Because that shot of the boys crossing the road, that's exactly the right perspective from the bridge that you would have seen.
I guess I spend time before I do each book, because unless it's based on real events or you have some really specific reference material, you're coming up with the entire world. So I start with a location, so in that case the roadway, and then I just imagine it from lots of different angles. And again, it's that kind of directory type thinking of where do I put the camera, and because you're dealing with sort of real world perspective to a degree in this book, and that it's, you know, not everything's just flat and stacked, you know, it's like it's as if someone's actually looking. So then I sort of look at it from different angles, and I sketch a bunch of little really quick drawings of, okay, should it be from higher up looking down, or should it be from the side, you know, looking at them, and things like that. And, you know, if you're doing something like looking from above, you can play with shadow and lighting in a different way, and different views, you know, read in different ways, like if you've got a really low angle versus a really high angle.
So it is like plotting out a movie.
Yeah.
I didn't realise it was
It is
so like that for you.
Yeah, definitely.
The other thing that I'm really grateful for is that you have embraced the 80s element of it. You know, this actually happened in 1983. It's a very long time ago. And I know with the planning for the movie, they want to set it in the present. And everyone's got mobile phones and blah, blah, blah. And that's fine if that's what they thing. But to me, this is a really beautiful homage to the authentic story
of the time it actually happened.
I looked at Stranger Things for the clothing, so I
interesting.
have folders and folders of reference photos that I used to kind of decide what everything's going to look like, and I had a folder of clothing that was mainly from Stranger Things because I love the boys' outfits in that show. So that's where I got a lot of that from.
And so for those listeners who might be new to the podcast or don't know, we are talking about Cleo and Rob, which is the children's story version of Cleo, Helen's New York Times bestseller. Is that how I say it? Yes. The story of how she lost her son. So it is very sensitive subject matter.
Well, it's more about the healing power of animals, and I think this is what Phoebe's tuned into beautifully with the children's version of the book, because children, I think, experience grief differently. They're very pragmatic, and sometimes they can seem as if they're not experiencing grief at all, and adults can think, oh wow, great, they're over it. They're not. It's very deep and ongoing, and that's why I wanted to write this book, because it's the book I would have loved to have been able to give Rob at the time.
I think like any child would be interested in it as well, and that, you know, it's something that is one of those weird things in society where we don't really talk about it until it's suddenly necessary too, you know, and it's like maybe there's value in preparing them for those ideas sooner rather than later, and not just doing it by,
because it's going to happen sooner or
brushing
later.
it under the rug until suddenly it's like, oh yeah, this is a thing that happens, like I'll just explain it to you.
It's very like how sex was when I was growing up. And so, you know, it was, everyone was doing it, but no one would talk about it because it was shameful.
That's right. And if you're someone like, I was a child who was very curious, and if someone's going to not talk about something, it's going to elevate it to the top level of my curiosity, which in the case of sex, you know, probably would have worked better if I had information sooner, right? And same with death, you know, because I experienced the loss of my mum at 21. I was a young adult, but still young, but I had that same sense, and I think you described it too, that the whole world's suddenly just been ripped, it's been tipped upside down, and you know, all of a sudden you just feel unprepared when, as you say, you're right, we all ought to be prepared for this, because it's the deal of being a human being. You're going to have loss.
I think it's a very Western thing.
It is, I also hope it will encourage children to be kind to other children who are going through any kind of sadness, because there's loss in their lives when their parents split up or they have to move town and go to another school. There's loss. It's great for kids to be reminded to actually reach out. Wow, that's not it. Linda wants me to ban reaching out.
I'm going to add that to the list.
I think also just seeing that bad things happen and then it can be okay.
It's
again,
recoverable.
You know?
Resilience.
We
need a bit more of that.
And I think you're right. I think it is a particularly Western thing. We were talking about Japan earlier today because of the link with anime and Phoebe's style, but I think the Japanese, for example, are really good at incorporating death into life. The way that it's talked about and accepted is really different. I noticed that, and one thing that I noticed as a young student living there when I did is, of course, the famous cherry blossom sakura. That time of year is very revered. And when I asked my mates in Japan, like, what's so cool about the sakura? Why does everyone stop and go for picnics and gather together under this fleeting tree? And I learned this concept called mono no aware, which is awareness of the passing of things. Mono no aware.
Wonderful.
Beautiful. And to them, the sakura really symbolizes that mono no aware because it's fleeting, it's beautiful, it's only there for a week or so. And to them, it symbolizes the appreciation of things that pass. And I think intrinsic in that is an acknowledgement that we pass. But I think you're right. I don't think Western culture, I think we're a bit tightly gripped onto things like our own mortality, our aging, this idea that we should always be happy, you know, everything's wonderful. It's like, no, life doesn't work like that, you know. And little kids, I think, it'll be lovely to see. I'm really excited. I got a copy today at the bookshop for my beautiful niece, Isla, and I'm really excited. She's 5, so she's pretty young, but she's pretty
in the
smart. She's pretty smart, and I reckon it'll be really fascinating to see what she thinks because, I can't wait to read it to her, actually.
So, Phoebe, how long did this take you?
Maybe, gosh, I'm trying to remember. I think a couple weeks drafting kind of process. So that starts with me. I usually go do it in a cafe because if I'm at my desk at work, I'm get too distracted. But if I'm at a cafe, I've got things to tune out, and it's like I'm just here, I'm just working on this, I have to focus on it. And I'll sit, and that's usually my first reading
of the
cafe
story in Wellington?
I did, but it's gone now.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I really liked Six Barrel Soda because it was on a first story, so you had a view of the street. It was always very quiet, and they had good music and bottomless filter coffee. And they're gone.
It's a good combo.
I know, tragic, but yeah. And I usually sit, and sometimes it takes 3 hours, but I'll just read the story for the first time. Usually, I'll try not to read it before that, and thumbnail in a sketchbook, so just really quick sketches of what comes to mind for each bit of text, and then also usually chopping up the text and thinking about, okay, what goes where. And I might do a couple sessions of that before I get to the point where I'm ready to take it to the computer, and then usually by that point I've kind of selected all the thumbnails that I think are working, and often I'll map it out a few different times. Like I'll challenge myself to map it out in a way that doesn't double up in the way I did before, just to see if I can find any new ideas or tease anything out. But yeah, some spreads, you know, it's really clear right away what you need, and then others don't come right away. But but then I've kind of made peace with that, because I'm like, that's fine, just let it sit and don't let it stop me from working. I'll just keep going with like a placeholder, and maybe that'll come later, and sometimes it doesn't, and then you have to just sit there and really nut it out. But other times it just kind of arrives, and you're like, okay, there's that tricky spot now, we've kind of figured it out. And then I'll draft on the computer everything to scale and send that over to the publisher. I think we had an extra step with yours because we kind of did an initial small thumbnails to kind of get the idea of the book. Without doing the full detailed drafts, which have a lot more time invested in figuring out, okay, what's the angle, what's the perspective, scale, all the kind of finicky
shadows
stuff.
And,
and that's all just black and white and quite sketchy. And then moving on to the finals, I think I had like a month and a half to do these, which is not actually a lot of time. Just because of how it's sandwiched in with other works. It would have been just over a month and a half, I think, and then a bit of time for touch-ups. And during that time, you're just going in, and I often start at 10 in the morning because I hate the morning, but then I'll be there till sometimes 10 at night consistently for weeks. And the last period of it, I just moved my whole work set up home so that I could just like get up, do it from like 9 in the morning until like late, and then it was really easy to like take breaks and like stretch and like just get back to it, because it's like there's just so much hours just to get them all finished. Like it's just a very time consuming process. And it's like I want to hand over something that I'm happy with as well, and it's like books are such lasting things that I don't want to just be like, here you go, it's whatever. I want to be happy with it, and I'm not always like 1,000% like this is my best ever I could do, but I'm like, this is what I could do in the time, and and like with this one I am really happy with what I
so
achieved.
Pleased to hear that. And already I think people who are helping others are tuned into this. Like my older daughter Lydia, who's a clinical psychologist, is about to give a seminar to road traffic police on dealing with stress, and she's asked for several copies, and she's going to weave it into her seminar. So I hope this book goes on.
I hope it finds its way to the coroners or something like that, because like when tragic deaths happen and there are children, it'd be wonderful to give people, even down the track a few weeks later or months later, it would be fantastic.
Because it's a story of hope, ultimately.
That's so cool. And with that process you just described, listening to that going, wow, that was a lot of hours. Can I ask a sort of question again from an outsider of your industry? Like, do you get compensated? Like, does the money you get as an illustrator cover all that? I can see the look on your face already. Loud laughs. How does that work? If you're spending so many hours?
It varies drastically, client to client, job to job.
Right.
So I think overall it can balance out. But also depends on where you're publishing, what the audience is like, how big that is, then print run, then sales. So obviously if you've got an international publication, more prints, more sales. Then, and so it is a lot about the revenue that comes in afterwards in terms of royalties. But I've gotten better about communicating up front that like what is realistic for me, and also becoming more efficient so that I can do them as quickly as possible to make it more worthwhile. But it is hard, and I sort of have to treat the books almost like a luxury, like a special project, and that I can only financially fit in so many a year. And I think
because they're so time consuming.
And it's just sort of where the industry's at, where the market's at, and it's like, I think there's a lot of people who work on these kind of projects where they're not relying on it for income, you know, it's a passion project, or they've retired already, and I think it's less common to have someone my age doing this kind of job.
Okay.
I think it's a vast achievement.
Yeah, so
I really do.
I agree.
Yeah, when you said you're earning a full-time living from
Yeah.
what you do, that is incredible.
It's impressive.
It's also because I do other work like for
How do you pay
apps,
the bills?
websites,
Okay.
advertising agencies, design agencies, and you know, again, client to client, brief to brief. Some pay
Yeah,
you know, significantly
well,
more, and it just really depends on the work. So I think overall it's okay, and like the New Zealand market, I think doesn't quite value the work or sort of budget for it as highly as the US does. So the American market, you know, pays significantly more for this type of work. But then I really value doing like New Zealand centric work because I'm from New Zealand, and you know, what does it mean for me to be creating random stuff for random people in America versus things for other New Zealanders? So there's kind of a trade-off as well.
Did you find out that Helen was a New Zealander like soon into the process?
Yeah.
And as soon as the publishers told me you were in your 20s, apart from being very impressed by your work, I thought, how wonderful. If this book takes off, it's such a great opportunity for this artist to get a global name. And this stage in my career, I can think of nothing better than to give a young, highly creative person a leg up. And so let's fingers and toes crossed.
Exactly.
And we've already had, you know, on
That's
Facebook
right.
inquiries from people in Germany,
Good.
all over the place, Russia.
I can see it finding its way. We spoke at our last episode last week that Helen was saying she doesn't feel it's a book she wants to push necessarily. She wants people to find it to find its place, you know, like a cat does sometimes find you. I think that's right, and I would encourage our audience, our listeners, to be recommending it because I think it is needed. So let's help the book find where it's meant to go, and it could be in practical situations like counselling, but also just, I think you're right, it just needs to destigmatise discussions of resilience, strength, healing, hurt, loss for kids, because kids are smarter than we think, I reckon.
Definitely.
And how did you, I mean, have you experienced loss in your life, Phoebe, that you have tuned in so
that I could
beautifully?
draw on.
Yeah, because when I was looking at the stuff, I thought this young woman really knows deep emotion.
Yeah, I guess actually when I was working on this book, yes, because my grandpa was really unwell, and I had a friend who had stage 4 cancer, like one of my best friends.
Oh, how?
Shouldn't talk about it now.
That's all right,
no,
it's a
she's
clinic.
Yeah, I cried last week. Sorry.
Emotional. Sorry. Yeah, so it was kind of cathartic to work on it sometimes. In fact, the page where, which I'll find it in the book, where I think it's like you're holding Rob. Yeah, so this one here, I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
Actually, that was right after, like that was going on, and then everything in Christchurch happened with the shootings, and that was like 2 days later when I was working on that piece, and that was the first time I actually like let myself feel really sad about it because it was such an overwhelming thing, and everyone felt so affected by it. But then working on that piece was like, oh, I'm getting it all out, and I like really enjoyed working on that piece for that reason, in a way, because it was, you know, people talk about, you know, creative practice as like a way to go through things emotionally or express yourself. So I guess in that instance it was kind of like that for that piece.
You.
Yeah, so it was like just the timing of it was quite interesting, and so for me it's kind of been a year of like thinking about, you know, death and passing and grief, with my grandpa passing as well, and it's, but in a nice way, like in a reflective, peaceful kind of way, and like so it's been an interesting project in that sense. And prior to that I had some grandparents pass away, but ones who were further away, and I was like less, like I didn't see them as much in my life, and you know, it still feels quite abstract because they were never like right there, you know, and I can still kind of imagine them down in their little houses in Dunedin, you know, and it's like, that's a nice thought, but the reality of it hits a bit less than when it's someone who's normally around.
And to lose a close friend of your own generation.
She didn't go. She's still gone.
But
she was very unwell. But she's better. Yeah.
Oh, that's
which is excellent. But it was just a lot.
Thank goodness.
With my grandpa as well, so it's just like, thinking about everything. But yeah, it made this, like, I guess this project could have added to that weight at that time in a way, but it didn't. Like, it kind of complemented it, which sounds strange, but
No, it's beautiful.
yeah.
And listening to the both of you, I think that's why what Helen can see in I feel emotional too.
Yeah,
hearing that.
sorry.
No,
You got me,
it's
damn you.
beautiful because like this story's connected with you, and we were just talking about coincidences and timing sometimes that we might explore that in our next episode, because that's almost a coincidence that the book gave you something too.
Yeah.
Helen's story gave you something as the illustrator. That's actually
And Helen's writing, like, just got me as well. Like, when I was drafting it in the cafes, I was like, oh, like, some little tears, and I just had to, like, conceal them, because I was just, you get so immersed in the story when you're trying to picture it, and then, yeah, like, just the process of actually those initial drafts even was, like, quite, yeah, emotionally, I don't know what the word is, but yeah.
I think there's something about transforming pain into art that's very deeply healing, not only for the artist but for the people who see the depth in the creation.
Yeah, this is a special book. I can't believe it. It's just incredible to hear this, because it's when you're not in this world, you just think, oh, it's illustrations of a book. No, it's not, is it? You really had to go in and find these things.
Yeah,
and
I feel like weirdly connected to Helen as well, because it's like you get so much into someone else's world, you know, but then you were over here and I was over there. We're working on it quite separately.
You did come over here in August and you didn't come and see me.
Not
You should
last
come
year.
see me.
No, but that was before.
Oh, before you even got the thing.
That was just before.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
otherwise I totally would. It'd be shady otherwise. Yeah.
No, well, I felt the same way, Phoebe, and I've been so
she's
looking
talked about
forward
you a
to
lot.
meeting
That's
you.
very true. The minute we conceived of this podcast, your name was on the list immediately. Always. Helen was straight away like, we've got to get Phoebe, because it's obviously a special relationship between the two of you. This it's beautiful actually to watch, and the fact that you're only meeting in the person today for the first time, it's so cool.
I had a similar thing, not to the same extent at all, but when I worked on the first book I worked on, which was about Sir Edmund Hillary, I did like such a deep dive on like all about his life and everything, and then I didn't know that about his wife and his child passing, and when I got up to that in the documentary, I cried because I was just like, oh my god, and by that point I was so like Edmund Hillary brain that I just felt really connected to you know, all of that.
That was a shocking time.
I hadn't known about that. But it's sort of like each story you sort of get stuck in this place and mindset with each one, and it's quite interesting diving in and out of that.
So it's really beyond just work, isn't it? In that sense, these projects are taking. You've got to give something of yourself, don't you?
Yeah, the book's more so. Yeah, the commercial work I do is more problem solving, kind of switch off, and then this probably is somewhere in the middle, I think. And with Cleo and Rob, I was able to work more in an illustrative style that I had sort of determined my own, like, made my own decisions about, whereas the first series of books I've done, they were just a product of me trying to figure out how to do a book and then kind of expanding on that. So this is the first one where it's like, okay, and here's how I would like to do it now that I have learned what I am doing.
I love that Phoebe is really tough and she defends herself.
Great.
Because we showed an early version of this to my granddaughters, Anna and Stella.
Yeah.
Annie and Stella. And Stella looked at the last time and she said, I've only got 3 fingers. And she said, I want that fixed. And so I thought, all right. Okay. So I dutifully sent this email off to the publisher. Stella's. Please tell us how you responded, Phoebe.
Okay, so no, people often like to point out to me that I often draw characters that have a thumb and 3 fingers instead of 4.
Yep.
And it's like, yes, thank you. I do know that because I did draw it and I can count. It's actually a method of drawing hands that has its origins in Disney, early Disney, and animation, and anything that's kind of stylized away from realism. And it's because if you're trying to often draw 4 fingers, the hand, when it's that stylized and kind of softened and rounded, it can look quite beefy and start to look unusual, and you start paying attention to the hand when you're not supposed to.
So it softens it.
Yeah, and it makes it easy to draw as well, and like the Simpsons only have 3 fingers, and it's a whole thing.
I hope you're listening, Stella.
And it's just, for me, it's like that's, you know, something that I learned about, and then that became the way that I liked drawing hands.
Does it become a signature for you in a sense that way?
I wouldn't call it a signature because it's so common in the industry.
It's just more that it's something you subscribe to.
Yeah, exactly. And
I
it's just
really-
part of the stylization that I choose to do.
I really admire
Yeah.
the way you pushed back on that. That was so good.
Well, I think lots of any work like this is a bit of push and pull, because I think if people, come at you about something and criticize an idea, it's very, especially if you're a woman, easy to just be like, oh, sorry,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
correct it how they said. Whereas often they may not realize that you actually have quite a strong rationale behind why you've done a certain thing. And if you can explain that and kind of argue your case, it becomes like a little debate. It's just like, I need to convince you of my case, and here's your case.
Well
and,
done.
We'll do it that way.
And it means the outcome will be best if it's been fought for and if there's passion and reason.
And I quite enjoy that process of like meeting someone in the middle, because I don't like assuming that I always know best, and so it's interesting to get the pushback and sort of say, oh, that's interesting, because everyone has such different interpretations of things. So I'm always trying to consider what other people's interpretations will be, but it's interesting to actually hear them and then be like, okay,
and
how do I...
to pull you to a bit, it might pull you to a better place too.
Totally, yeah.
So now this is the inevitable question. What's your advice to anyone listening who wants to become a book illustrator?
I always get asked this.
Yeah, I bet you do.
I hate answering it because there's no one path.
Okay.
It's quite... Everyone's got their own path there, and, I'll have had a lucky break in points, and then other times I'll have just done the work, and it is a slog. So I can't give you an exact path, but I think if it's all that you care about and want to do, you often, could find yourself in the right place or the right position. And it's also just about being nice to work with and not being a dick to people. And
that's very good advice.
Yeah.
Don't be a dick to people.
Yeah, don't be a dick. And just, I think a lot of people sort of hide away as well. They don't share what they're doing. They sort of squirrel away, and they're like, everything needs to be perfect before I share it with anyone. And I think you have to let go of that. And often actually it's the drawings I do that take 2 minutes that people enjoy more than something I might have spent 2 months on, and I think just being less precious is important, and more focused on connection with others as well as the work. Yeah, and then just be prepared to work lots and alienate some friends and family occasionally, and then recover those relationships when you're free, and then you get busy again, and it's just a nice back and forth that everyone gets used to, because it is kind of patches of intense busyness and then some chill time. So it's not like a normal 9 to 5. I think it's kind of do the work when it needs doing and then take a break.
Waves of intensity.
Yeah, which is like you adjust to, and I think it's more making other people around you understand that as well, and just being like, I will be free and available to you, but not right now, and not because it's a Saturday necessarily, but then it's like I might be free for 2 whole weeks, after that, or I could drop something on a Tuesday.
For a writer, and I remember sometimes when I've been on the island, because it's quite a good place to work, and then someone will come and knock on the door and they'll say, are you writing or just pretending to? And I think, oh God, yes, I'm pretending to write. That's right, because there's always this sort of insecurity underneath it all, that I'm not a real writer, I'm just pretending to. So it's a funny world.
But I think as well, just being comfortable with the difficult parts of the process is really important as well. So if you're working on a creative project, you should not know what the hell you're doing and be doubting yourself at regular intervals and be really confused and feel like quitting. Like, that is inherent to the process of finishing any project. It's just patches of like, where the hell am I, and should I even be doing this? And if you're not having that, then you're probably doing it wrong. And I think once you have enough self-awareness to sort of know that that's like inherent to what you're doing, when you encounter those moments or those roadblocks, it's easy to kick back and just be like, okay, I'm just in this patch where I don't know exactly where to go next, and I'm doubting it all, and you just stick with it, just don't run away from the project. Like, I mean, take a break if you need to, but keep chipping away, because things do emerge or sort of become obvious again. And it's like that thing I talked about earlier, where if I get stuck on something, I'll just let it sit for a bit, and leave it and move on and keep working on the rest of it, and then come back to it, or wait until a solution kind of presents itself, or wait until a time where it's evident that I really need to sit there and brainstorm it out. But just kind of not getting too hung up on those tricky spots, I guess.
That's excellent advice.
I think that's almost the definition of being a professional compared to being an amateur, because an amateur has the luxury of saying, oh yeah, no, I've given up on that. But if you're a professional, you may well have signed a contract and
exactly.
the clock will be ticking, and
and
you still want to do your absolute best and not disappoint your audience.
And that's, I mean, I got a lot of value because my honours project was kind of around this stuff, and it actually helped all of my process afterwards. It was like all about the psychology behind creative process and why people get stopped from doing things, and I got a lot of the information about it, was sort of guiding from it from IDEO, and they broke it down into some like primary fears, I think. So it was like fear of taking the first step, like starting a project is really hard. That's normal, and it's not a reason to not do it. And then fear of the unknown, so not knowing what you're doing is really normal and inherent in your creative process. Yeah, and scary. Totally. And then fear of being judged. You might hold back on a bunch of ideas because you're scared of how other people are going to interpret them, or you might edit yourself because you're scared, or you might not do something because you're like, oh no, these people will think this about me, and that's all just in your own head anyway. And then, fuck, what were the other two?
It's an F-bomb.
Sorry.
But that's one of, Kate, that's been one of your fears writing your book.
Yes, I
what
relate
will
to
my
that.
family say?
Yeah.
100%. And all of those first three you mentioned, I had such resistance to even starting. In the end, I started my novel in the middle of the night. I woke up at 4 a.m, got my laptop, went brrr, wrote the first page, and then went, thank God for that, it started now.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I was so scared to start it.
Yeah.
Because in case it would be crap.
I think once you have a self-awareness around it, it makes it easier, because then you're like putting it off, but you're like, oh, I'm putting it off because I don't want to start it, because starting it's really hard, and then it becomes easier to just like get in there and do it.
Advice.
I think the other two were around, the other one was around control, so the fear of losing control of the project or where it goes or aspects of it. And then the last thing was kind of around subconscious processing, so how it's okay to step back if you're stuck as well, and let your mind just kind of tick over it a little bit, because it will do that.
Writer's box. Helen has a writer's box full of artifacts that can help you when you are stuck to just dive back into the feelings and memories of what you're doing.
Totally. And just having time to have your brain empty is really important, like just going for a walk or sitting at a bus stop. And often ideas just can come to you in those moments, even though you weren't necessarily thinking about it. I went home and had a nap once and then came up with something. I came up with an idea for a book, the one I was talking to you about, when I was putting on eyeliner one day. It just like wafted down. I was like, oh,
she has very beautiful eyeliner, for those who can't see. It's very precision winged eyeliner.
Thank you. But just kind of allowing for those moments of like your brain's just sort of
We've talked
peaceful.
quite a bit about
We've
that.
talked a lot about that at the start of the
Time
podcast,
and
allowing space for
Time and
creativity.
space,
And I think you said, Helen, like, I've never had a good idea in a crowded room full of crazy things. Like, it's the times when the volume's turned down and your brain's slowed down and you're giving yourself time out. Or...
You definitely need to be relaxed. And like when I work at the studio, I used to beat myself up if I couldn't get into the work right away. But actually you need to be relaxed. So now I kind of let myself settle in properly, and then I'll find I'll gradually get more and more into it. And then I'm just in it for like 3 hours and I don't even notice, because I've let myself gently get in there, rather than going, oh no, I'm here and now I have to work right away and get lots done right away. And it's like, just because you're not like filling 8 hours exactly with work, you might have a 3-hour window that's more productive than
and each day
what you
will
could have
be
done otherwise.
presumably different. You said that this
Totally,
morning about the window that Phoebe created, like that for today, you seem to accept that the mood you're in and the day that it was and the energy you have was going to be what came out, and that's okay.
I think that's really important as well.
And you had to work within the shape
parameters.
of the window.
That's right. That was a literal parameter.
And
like,
the 2 dogs who watched you.
That was so cute. Why are you so wise? You're 27. What is going on? You're really wise.
Good to know. I think so.
You figured this out, but that's excellent advice. And I know, and again, it's so much stuff we've touched on from the very start. So you're a wise woman.
An old soul.
Just think a lot about things. And illustrating, you have way too much time to think about things, to be honest, because you're just there in your own mind, colouring in for maybe a month, essentially.
Is it isolating in that sense? as a job, or
it can be
balanced by?
I think sometimes it's nice and you want to be on your own in that space and just get it done, and then other times you're like, damn, I wish someone was around that I could just like have a chat to, and sometimes my studio buddies are. Yeah, but
you want a friend in the cupboard, don't you?
Yeah.
Just open and go, come and play, and then close it.
Yeah, pretty much.
That would be good.
So I would say it varies on that front. Yeah, and it depends how much you're getting outside of the job as well.
Sometimes when I've been halfway or partway through a book and I'm out of everyone else's loop, I'll go to a 2:00 movie or an absolute junk movie that I would never normally go to, but it rests the brain.
Yeah, totally.
It's like The Bachelorette.
Yeah. Exactly. And just like teeing up lunch breaks with people is good. You know, to stay social. And some of the jobs I do are more involved with other people than the book stuff. So I actually it sounds weird to people. I watch movies and TV shows in the background while I work, so I don't look at them, but I have them on a secondary screen. Yeah, so I think I was watching the OC when I worked on my last book. I can't remember what I was watching for this one.
As in,
Orange County, and then I was watching Lost for another book. I was watching Walking Dead for another book.
With audio?
Yeah, so it's like it's just the TV shows running on the side.
Yeah,
and occasionally I'll glance at it, but mainly it takes my brain away from thinking too much about what I'm doing, and it leaves that part intuitive, so that I'm not like, oh, do I need a line here? Oh, how's this colour?
That's like surgeons listening to music while they chop your brain out.
Probably a little bit like that.
They do. They play music.
Yeah, it does. It gives that nervous part of your brain something else to chew on. I think.
I need utter silence when I write.
Yeah,
but
sometimes you do. Yeah, and Ken Burns' war documentaries recently. I watched hours and hours of Ken Burns.
Infusing into your work.
Yeah, but it's cool because sometimes you don't need your brain on the work, and then you just watch lots of TED Talks and you can like learn heaps of stuff, and you're like, two things at once, but don't do it too much, you fry your brain. Sometimes if you can do that with your work, sometimes like having a podcast or something. You don't always need to be full focus with that part of your mind. You can just trust your hand to like know what it's doing, and
I feel like you have a good grip on your brain and mind. I'm very impressed.
It is. It's been a fascinating clinic.
Really this has been excellent advice, particularly that stuff you talked about with the fears. I relate to every single fear you brought up then, but I haven't mastered this idea that I don't recognise it when it's happening, so I need to get better.
I think that's
what
practice.
you were saying. Yeah.
And you still fall into it, and it's very much your world when you're having those moments. It's just, even if afterwards you can be like, oh, that's what that was, it can take the edge off.
That's excellent advice for, I think, any creatives out there listening to this or people tackling a creative project. That's really cool.
Wonderful. Really valuable.
It is. We probably should wrap it up because I'm just aware we've chatted and chatted away. But that was fabulous, Phoebe. It was so lovely to meet you and to watch you two connecting. And this morning was gorgeous. So we took a quick video as well at the bookstore. So we'll put that in the Facebook group as well if you haven't already seen it.
So I guess it's time to check out of the clinic.
It is. Yes.
And I don't think anyone needs to pay this week.
No.
Because everyone's given so much today.
But we often have homework as well. I think last week I got no homework, which is good.
That's because you cried.
I did. I cried a lot
Phoebe
last
cried
week.
today, so she doesn't get
next
homework.
time.
Yeah. Oh no.
Exactly. But just a quick report that my word count is up to 10,532.
Good.
And I'm almost ready, Helen, to give you the reworked sections you've already read. I've had to.
I want the structure.
I've tried to add depth to the main character. I've made the husband more likable. I've put the best friend right in there, and I have to unalive the mother in there. I'm going to make her previously deceased rather than alive. So I've introduced a stepmom. So lots changed.
Sounds excellent.
Yeah. So we'll get into that perhaps next time. And you guys will be in New Zealand. Tomorrow, is that right? Yeah.
We've got a tour, really. We've got this fabulous launch in Auckland.
Yeah.
You're
going to that as well?
Yes.
Of course,
great. Oh, good.
Yeah. Are you coming to Poppy's as well?
Is it
in Howick? No, in Howick in Auckland.
Oh, yes.
Yes, yes.
And so, the duration of
and then we've got, we're visiting St Cuthbert's Girls' School.
Oh, wonderful.
And Dorothy Butler's with the Casketeers, and I was so nervous. I thought I wanted to get them a gift, but I didn't know what to get them. But I think I've nailed it.
Oh,
I'll show you.
And as your social media advisor, Helen, I urge you to please get a photo at every venue together, because it's just great, and you pop it on your social, and particularly with the casketeer.
I know.
That's so exciting. Get a sideways one in case we want to use it for your cover image.
Well, it's sort of coffin
Long
shape.
ways. There's coffin.
I don't think
Lengthways
they're bringing coffins.
I love them too, I can tell. Oh dear, so it's going to be an exciting time. Will we do a podcast next week, do you think? We'll see, we'll work it out. Or you might be away.
I might be on the island because our next launch is on Phillip Island.
Yeah.
Well, tomorrow we've got the Sun Bookshop,
Yes.
but this might not be out then. The
Maybe,
Younger Sun Bookshop in Yarraville on Saturday, and then next Thursday night at the
it's
Cows
Phillip Island.
Uniting Church.
Yeah, we could.
Some wonderful characters there
That's
will
gonna be
be
fun.
launching the Phillip
Yes.
Island
And
edition.
then you're off to New Zealand.
And then
Yes, well, we'll let you know when our next episode is. We might have to have a little break after that, but yes, we've got lots of exciting ideas all the time, don't we, Helen? All we need is one coffee, something sweet, and a new idea just pops up. But thank you so much for joining us, Phoebe.
Yes,
It was lovely to meet you.
too.
Your work
Thank
is
you.
beautiful. I actually feel really excited to read this to Isla, because I always read her a couple of books when she stays at my house. So she'll be thrilled to know that I know the author and the illustrator. I can just tell Isla will love that. And it's a signed copy. You can get signed copies at Jeffrey's. These two both signed them today.
We'll be signing wherever we go.
Oh, well, there you go. So,
Yeah.
yes. Check out Helen's Facebook page for all the events that we've been mentioning. If you're
Oh, that one's
able
not
to go.
signed.
Oh, my one is.
Oh,
My one's
right.
signed over there. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we should probably wrap it up.
Okay.
So the clinic is officially closed. Jonah's left the room. That was good. You got to see a close up of Jonah's bottom as well. That was a special bonus.
I'm going to have a chocolate.
Yes, I think we all will. All right. Well, we'll see you next time, everybody.
Yeah. Bye.